Thank you, Mr Chair. Councillors.
Right, Liz and Marguerite.
Recommendation, Mr Chair.
The mover, seconder, Councillor Collins.
Good morning, councillors and Mr Mayor. So this paper asks you to adopt the revised Auckland Council fees framework and expense policy for appointed members. The framework was first adopted in 2014, and we're proposing 3 key changes. We've done a review of the framework because we are right in the middle of, we've just appointed our advisory panels, and we're in the process of appointing our independent hearings commissioner, and the framework applies to both. So timing-wise, it was timely to do it now. There's 3 key changes that we're proposing. First one is to increase the fees for independent commissioners by 10%. These fees have been unchanged since 2010. We're getting some pretty strong feedback from our commissioners that it is timely to review them. The second change is the application of the expenses policy to commissioners. At the moment, the what expenses are being reimbursed is in their individual contracts, so it's just making our life easier. And the third one is making explicit a practice that has been happening for since 2011, but was not transparent in the framework, about providing some support to members, to disabled members. So that applies in particular to the members of the Disability Advisory Panel. And it's basically making it explicit that we have to provide them with what is called, in the jargon, reasonable accommodations, in order to have the necessary support for them to be able to perform their role effectively. So that's the short version. Happy to give more details if needed.
Marguerite, have we thought about building in an inflationary aspect anyway, so that it automatically happens each year, rather than letting it lapse another 6 years, or was that not necessary in your mind?
We could certainly do that. I think, through your chair, because all of the fees and expenses are captured within the one framework and policy, it would be reasonable to make sure that any inflationary element is actually built into that policy as a whole.
We would have to look at the impact on the ongoing impact on fees that we charge back to our customers, though. So
maybe we should a work in progress on that. Meg off.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr Chairman. Look, I can understand the rationale. It's pretty clear. It's equivalent to the wage price inflation, and it leaves us about mid-placed in terms of the average for other councils. And the quantum we're talking about for council isn't great, 17,000, but for applicants somewhat bigger. My 2 questions are these. One, is there actually evidence of recruitment and retention problems? Because that's often the defining thing when you change fees. And secondly, the descriptor of our commissioners are professionals who are outstanding in their fields of expertise. I don't know many hearing commissioners. I'd just like to know whether that's an accurate assessment of the skills of our hearing commissioners.
I mean,
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr Chairman, if you don't mind me answering that,
Yeah, sure.
Mr Mayor, because I've just been part of a process with Councillor Quacks and our senior staff of interviewing a whole pool, over 50 commissioners, and I am absolutely so impressed with the high calibre of these people. I mean, they are making decisions on behalf of this council, and actually it is really important for us to provide people and that are top-notch, because these are huge decisions. They take a lot of judgment and expertise. They're not just like sitting around, kind of reading a report, and, they actually have to apply a lot of judgment and skill. And so these are the decisions that we have to defend, sometimes in environment court, places like that. They have to be absolutely robust, and we need the best possible people. And when I look back, I'm also told that it's never increased in this council, but my understanding was 3 years before amalgamation, there were no increases either. So it amounts to about 1% increase a year. So I feel very confident that we've got a very high calibre group of people. They weren't complaining, but when we said, look, we're reviewing it, they said, oh, that would be really nice. We get it, we enjoy it, but often they can get more money elsewhere. And we have got probably one of the fastest growth rates and resource consent rates in the country. We need to be able to make sure they're available to us, and they're not thinking, well, actually, I can do better somewhere else. Because without them, we can't actually meet the legal requirements of resource consents and building, and we need that badly. So I guess that's a long answer, but I do feel very confident that they are highly skilled professionals.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I can, maybe that's been helpful. If I could just have some clarification about whether we have hard empirical evidence of recruitment and retention, or we might face that in the future. That wasn't clear to me from the report.
Thank you. Through the chair, we have certainly had an indication with recruitment and retention that we are going to struggle more and more over the next few recruitment rounds. I actually have received quite a lot of feedback from independent commissioners over the last 3 years, and particularly in the recruitment 3 years ago as well, that council is not being fair in terms of its reluctance to review the rates of remuneration. We've also had instances where commissioners have pulled out of hearings because they've had better offers elsewhere that pay more. So the indication that we've had, particularly recently, is that we are struggling not to retain commissioners within our pool, but actually the commitment of those commissioners to attend hearings and follow through when they're appointed.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Just on the other side of the coin, and taking up one of the comments that you made in the discussion and recommendation, you talk about the potential reputational impact for council, particularly in light of, in respect to the people who end up bearing the cost of the increase. What's the sort of feedback or observations you would make on that, given that obviously there's going to be a consequential cost, not so much for council, but for applicants?
Sorry, I'll just turn to that table.
So, but all in all, the total cost that will go back to applicants is, we've estimated to be about $200,000. That's obviously in total. Yes, it is an increase for applicants. It is an increase. It's a relatively modest increase given the total amount of fees that they have to pay for those big resource consents. But those fees haven't changed for a long time either. So I don't think it's unreasonable for both fees for the commissioners and the applicants to move as time passes. Have we, with regards to your question of whether we've consulted with the public, the answer is no.
I just was thinking more, Marguerite, of people that go through the process where they're actually having to require hearings commissioners. If Auckland Council sort of monitors feedback there, and particularly as it goes to pricing, you can imagine what people would say, but I just wonder if we had any sort of anything a little bit more structured in terms of keeping check of how financial decisions like this can potentially impact on people that are engaged in this process. That was all.
Through the chair, the impact on applicants for an increase in fees is very minimal in terms of the overall applications for resource consents. and other resource management decisions. So, for example, less than 5% of resource consent applications will be heard by duty commissioners, so that'll be part of the impact on applicants. The feedback that I've received from resource consenting staff is that often applicants actually request the independent commissioners to be considering their applications because of their higher level of expertise and also their independence. Less than 1% of those applications go to hearing, which is where the bulk of the impact will be held. Those hearings are essentially applications where they're not complying within our normal standard rules, for example. So this is for large, significant proposals generally that go outside of the scope of what council's already determined to be appropriate. So very, very minimal we consider to be the impact on applicants.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I've got two questions. One is on the mileage allowance. I wondered why you were changing the mileage allowance for commissioners from the IRD rate to the rate for elected members if they're not elected members. And my second question is around the disability, extra support for our disability support panel. Bearing in mind that this panel's been operating for 2 terms, we're in our 3rd term, and we haven't had the reasonable accommodations, sort of extra funding. Does that mean that we haven't been aligned with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities for the last 2 terms?
Okay, through you, Mr Chair. With regards to the mileage, for whatever reason, the Remuneration Authority actually uses the AA rate and it's when we were reviewing the policies to make sure that they were aligned that we actually realized that they were 2 different rates. And it's just for ease of administration, making sure that we're applying the same rate because it's going through the same payroll system.
So is it more or less?
So the RRD rate is 0.72, 73, and the AA rate is 0.74. So it's very minimal. Yeah. With regards to your second question, so we have paid for support persons for disabled members of the disability panel before, so we were providing for those payments, but it wasn't explicit in the framework, and there was no consistent rule that we could apply. So actually, we were paying the same rate as the rate that we're paying to the members, and I thought it would be easier to have to have it explicit and to have a formula in there that makes it transparent. And the reason why I'm suggesting that we make it 50% of the rate that the members are being paid is that if the rate for the members increases, then it will follow up as opposed to have a set fee.
And this is my final supplementary. So that's all within the current budget we have allocated to the panels?
Yes, that is correct.
Right, we have Councillor Quacks and Councillor Sayers, and we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to finish everything before 1 o'clock easily.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and I just want to back up the comments that were made by Councillor Cooper in regards to this. As one of the councillors who interviewed these commissioners on behalf of the council, I've got to say that I was highly impressed by the quality of the people that put themselves forward to do this. And these were some of the leaders in their fields in legal, engineering, architecture, heritage and RMA. These were very highly qualified people. And look, people around here know how dry I am, and the driest of the dry, but $17,000 is all that the council is coming out of the public purse. And I would expect that certainly the applicants would be more than happy to be assured that they're getting the highest quality commissioners that are available. for this, so I don't think that we'll hear any quibbling from anybody on this.
Thank you, Councillor Quacks. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following up on Councillor Simpson's question around the mileage, and under this, because my understanding at the moment the mileage drops at a certain point. I think it's 5,000 k's or something like that. Is that part of this, considered in this review? Who makes that decision? Is that through the AA you mentioned, or IRD, or is that an internal policy, and has that been reviewed as part of this process?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the rule for elected members, the 5,000 kilometre rule for elected members is set by the Remuneration Authority. So we apply those rules as directed in their direction, as directed by them. We haven't put it in this framework because we've never had the case of either a panel member or a hearings commissioner doing more than 5,000 kilometres, and we do appoint people within the Auckland region. So and the number of meetings or the number of hearings that they do, they're very, very far from that limit. So we didn't consider it was necessary to put it in there.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a mover and a seconder. I'm going to put the resolutions A, B and C. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Right, we have a